It's wonderful to see such a group of people from Canada, from Mexico, from the USA, and throughout Europe. I'm now in Hungary, so we are doing a physical retreat here for the Hungarian sangha. So this is both an online and a physical retreat. I trust it will go well. So far, so good. We could not join you for the whole retreat because we are 7 hours time difference from you, but we will be joining as much as we can. You can hear me okay? I would like to begin by taking up what is called Bodhicitta, a Sanskrit term. Bodhi basically is awakening, and citta is mind, simply. It's often translated as something like arousing the mind to awaken. I would prefer to say arousing the mind of awakening, arousing the mind that is awake, not to awakening. This is a very basic Mahayana notion, and it goes back even farther than the Mahayana. It is very much connected with letting go of the self-delusion that we are, and also great compassion for all beings. Both of these are intimately connected with this bodhicitta. Again, arousing the mind of awakening. Practically speaking, we do need to devote ourselves to the practice, to commit ourselves, not just for a time on the cushion or during a retreat, but to devote, to give ourselves fully. It doesn't mean we can't be married or have a family or a job, but that we do commit ourselves once we arouse this mind of awakening. It's not just a momentary decision. It is something that we must continue as best as we can, to continue throughout our lives. It is, in the beginning, a kind of determination, a kind of decision. We may come to a point where we realize this is what I have to do in this life. Maybe it's not clear exactly how to do it, but somehow I must give myself to this practice, to awaken. This is what is real. This is what must be done in this life. It doesn't have to be a perfect arousing of the mind, but it does have to be genuine, sincere, and it must be continued with a kind of determination. Through proper practice in time, we find that it is no longer rooted in the self-will and this determination. It comes to be grounded in something much deeper, as if the universe is supporting us. After all, it is, isn't it? But when we wake up to that fact, instead of banging our head against the wall of ourselves, trying to get somewhere, we realize that we are coming from it, however imperfectly, or maybe it's not clear, but we know this is the direction of our life. This is the direction our life must take. In the beginning, a kind of will, self-will, determination. Yes, it's necessary. If not, you know, you will never get out of the circles that you're going in, the delusions that you're going in. But that, of course, is not the end of practice. We can say practice really begins when it becomes so total that it's no longer this self-will, me pushing, banging against the wall of myself. Once again, to get out of the patterns that we have put ourselves in, it does take work. Yes, patience, humility, humbleness, determination. It's got to be a life of practice. Again, that doesn't mean you can't do anything else. You can't have a fulfilled life with family and so on. No, not at all. But you do have to give all of yourself to this. It's not a hobby. It's not something you sometimes do. It comes to be the way we are. We have just been sitting for several hours together. Wonderful. Do you see? Do you realize what your mind is doing? Do you really see? Do you really realize what your mind is doing? In a sense, this is the first task of Zazen. To really see, to realize what our mind is doing. Once you see that, Bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, cannot help but arise, you see? Once you clearly see what your mind is doing, you cannot help but rouse this mind of awakening. Stick with the practice. Sometimes it can be difficult, it can be painful, it can be frustrating. Yes, stick with it. Come to love it. Then you'll know you're practicing properly. Come to love the practice. I spent a long time sitting in a genuine Rinzai Zen monastery in Japan. Almost an hour, 50-minute period, 50-minute period, another 50-minute period, another 50-minute period, 3 in the morning till 10:30, 11 at night. It was excruciating. It was a great struggle. Perhaps being somewhat desperate helps. But you see, being desperate is, in a sense, the negative, the dark side of the bodhicitta. The bright side is rousing the mind of awakening. When it's not quite yet there, well, there's a kind of a desperation. We realize this is what we must do, but maybe it's not yet clear how to do it, how to proceed. You may feel like you're just going around and around and around. Yes, this is the difficulty, the frustration of practice. But by giving ourselves to it, things become clear. I spent years struggling in the monastery. And I got to the point seeing some of the monks come, spend a year or 2 or 3 years, and then they would go. And some of them, of course, had a lot of pain too. Some of them seemed to go through it pretty easily. But I got to the point where I felt this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. I'm just going to sit there and wait for that damn bell to ring after 50 minutes. And then I'm going to get up, go take a piss, and come back and do it again. And it is not going to get better. And it occurred to me, well, if that's the way it is, so be it. What's the alternative? To turn away from it? I can't do that. No. If I will spend the rest of my life just waiting for that damn bell to ring, that's what I will do. Well, you know what happened. Huh? Around that time, the practice became a lot easier. Something loosened in the practice. It started to become a joy. And it started to become, oh, the bell already rang. Well, I'm just going to continue sitting. Be careful here. It's not that the practice becomes weaker. On the contrary, it's infinitely stronger because it's beyond mere willpower at that point. You're no longer banging up against the wall of yourself. So it's like a limitless, vast source of energy now can come out. There is no real hindrance, sleepiness, pain, so on. No, they're not real hindrances then. Before this point, almost anything can become a hindrance. Huh? The sitting, the breaks, the meal. But once you get to that point where you have given all of yourself, if this is the way it is, so be it. I will do this practice with all the love that I have, that I can muster until I die. Well, I think you will see the practice takes a turn, a very important turn around that time. It becomes easier. We become at ease with the practice. And again, it doesn't become weaker then, it becomes infinitely stronger. Nothing can hinder that. There is where you must continue on. Just because it has become easy, you have tasted real ease, doesn't mean you're done. Don't make that fatal mistake. Sometimes a stubborn guide can be helpful along the way when you feel you just can't get out of the hole you're in. A stubborn guide can also be helpful when you feel you have opened up and released and you've experienced it and this is it. This must be the Bodhi of Bodhicitta, the awakening. Well, this is where you really need to be careful, critical, humble, and to seek guidance if you can. Having said that much, I trust you can see what the practice of Zazen is, what it is for, so to speak. Huh? Putting our body like this is simply a way of helping us to give all of ourselves. Breathing the way that we do in Zazen is the same thing. Huh? And of course, our mind, our mental attitude, huh? To enter samadhi, this concentrated oneness, and then just to go right through it to the very bottom. The practice of body, of breath, and of mind come to be one. I trust you can also see how, for example, a koan can be helpful. It can help keep us where we need to be. It prevents us from escaping, from wandering off into our old routines, our old mental cycles that we've been in 100 times and know they don't go anywhere, but there we go again. If you really lock on to a koan, and again, it's there, it's there. If you want to look in books and find some statements by Zen masters, they can be very helpful. But I assure you, the essential thing is already there. To open up to that fact. In a sense, that is what bodhicitta is. To open up to the fact that this is awakening, opening up to itself. That's what it is. Koans are not absolutely necessary. No. In Rinzai Zen, we tend to use them a lot. They can be abused, they can turn into playthings. They often are. And this is counterproductive, to say the least. We learn how to answer the koan instead of arouse the mind of awakening itself. Huh? Don't let your practice, don't let your koan become a plaything. Huh? It is this one great matter of life and death. And it is right under our feet. And what we call bodhicitta is just a way of helping us to open up to it, to open up to what we really are. We don't have to become someone else, something else. I'm deluded now, but eventually I will become enlightened. It's not that kind of thing. That's the ego playing games with itself. You'll never get there that way. This one, here and now. How perfect is it? Well, how perfect does it need to be? Huh? I want to leave plenty of time for questions, both from the physical sangha here, the Hungarians, but also from all of you online. It looks like we've got, I don't know, 60, 70 people, but 80 with us here. So, Anne or someone may have to flick through a couple of pages, but please take a moment and consider, do you have a real question, a question that needs to be asked about the practice? If you do, make it as clear as possible. One sentence should do. What's the point of your question? Get that clear, and the answer can become clear. So for the benefit of everyone, feel free to raise a question, but first make sure it is a question from out of the practice and that it is as clear as you can make it. First, please feel free to stand up and stretch for a moment. Thank you for listening so intently.
My question is on the effortlessness of practice. And you mentioned about being without self and this self-will. Is the ultimate practice to let go of that small self and to let these actions arise naturally?
Okay, so far so good. Can you continue?
So in my current practice, a lot of it is just to let go of how I try to manipulate situations. And it's just about being in the moment and not striving to do anything. And naturally what happens is when someone asks me to do something, even though I used to hate it, my body naturally gravitates towards it without question. I'm just wondering if that's a right way to cultivate this, letting go of me trying to control everything and me just trying to be the best help to others.
Yes, it sounds like you're on the right track, Elijah. I noticed in my practice, I was really trying to do it. I was giving all the self that I had anyway. But I found that it could be very disturbing if people that weren't involved in the practice, for example, wanted my attention. You follow? Yeah. This is not important because the practice is really important. Everything else is not important. So it was almost as if you would try to escape from that stuff. But as you just said, if the practice is going in the right direction, if the practice is maturing, rather than trying to get away from any kind of hindrance, you actually go towards it. You actually go towards it. Any felt suffering or distress of another draws us to it. Can we solve all the problems of the world? Can we, Elijah?
Maybe one being at a time.
Well, that's a good way to take it. Yeah. We are not going to create a perfect world. There are always beings being born. There will always be destruction as well. Yes, in this world, that's the way it is. And yet, did you say gravitate toward, the actual distress, dis-ease of the other? You see, don't you? We do that because we may not be able to take their distress away. in a sense, everyone has to find out how to do that for themselves. We may offer some helpful words or just be with them, hold their hand if they're dying, for example. But the thing is just being with them, being without self with them. It's not going to solve all the problems of the world, but it may be just what is needed at that time. So it seems to me you are, as you said, naturally going in the right direction. Just keep your eye open. What happens when someone comes and they ask you to do something you think is wrong? What do you do then?
Would you like me to try and answer this?
If you would like.
I guess when we hold an expectation for the future, we're already setting ourselves up for failure. I'd like to live more in a dynamic state where if I'm just in the moment and I don't judge anything in the future, I hope that things will naturally take the right course, that I can let go of my self-centered views. I can let go of my projections on how I view the situation. And if I can let all these thoughts and perceptions kind of crumble, that natural wisdom and compassion will emerge. At least that's what I hope to do, or where
How
I'd like
long
my
have you been practicing, Elijah?
2.5 years, 2 years.
You're well on the way, huh?
I'm really into the practice.
I can see that. Continue on, continue on. Do you want to say anything else?
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much for being here, for answering my question, and for helping all of us. Appreciate it.
It's yourself.
Hello, Jeff.
Okay, Lucian, huh?
Nice to see you. Thank you. I don't know that this is directly about practice, but I know you wrote about Layman Pang as a deeply enlightened layperson. And I always wondered why he threw his treasure in the river when he decided to fully immerse himself in Zen or Chan, rather than give it to the needy.
Yeah, he had a wife and 2 children, actually. He was a layman, he was a worldly man. And it's a legend, not a river, but the lake. It says that he took all of his worldly possessions. You can imagine what his wife thought about this, huh? I wonder if she consulted with her first. But anyway, it says in the legend, huh, that he took all of his worldly possessions, which would be all the worldly possessions of the family, put it in a boat and sunk it in the lake. I would take that symbolically, not literally.
Okay.
In other words, what he had to do was, you don't have to get rid of everything that you have. You can get rid of every possession that you have and still cling, can't you?
Sure.
So,
It's the attachment.
So your question is a good one, huh? Did he really have to do that? Well, I wonder if he even did, historically. There was a Layman Pang, and we know a lot about him, but there's also a lot of legend as well. So I would take it for what it really should mean. There's only one thing you really have to let go of, sink in the bottom of the lake, and that's a delusion anyway, isn't it, David?
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Would I be on the right track? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. You say arousing mind. Is there can you also use the term energy? I've somehow just arousing that which doesn't kind of land anywhere. It's just, that's the
something more primal than mind. In
Yes.
a way, that's a good point, Cyrus. Yeah, because if you say arouse the mind of awakening, it can sound like, okay, don't have the mind, this mind and that mind, the other mind, but the mind, now another mind, the mind of awakening. And that can be confusing, huh? The raw energy, huh? Because it's not just a mental thing. You know, the term mind is a very, very generic term, even more generic when it came into China. It was something that included the body and the mind. You know, that kind of distinction that we make is just not relevant. Huh? The 5 skandhas we can talk about, huh? Body and mind in terms of the 5 skandhas, but really, you can't just pick one out and say, this is it. It is alive in us as body, mind. So it's a good point. The mind, the energy of awakening, the vitality, the vital energy that is awakening. Yes, well said. Thank you. You want to say anything else, Cyrus?
No, those words, primal energy and vitality, it's like there is the, to paraphrase what you said earlier, to make it clear for myself, there is the motion, there is that, yeah, I can only describe it as a motion. It's the coming from that primalness. There is the determination, and in the same moment, the realization, oh, whoa, that's it, huh? Not going anywhere else. I have something with purifying it. I know it's not about getting it perfect, but just the purification of, yes, I sit, I do. So you've answered it. I don't have any more. I don't have any more questions for it. Thank you.
I think in Chinese sutra text is a mind of a bodhicitta, more referring to a vow of a compassion. So when taking this, arousing this mind, that means arousing your compassionate mind and to do something. So that's it.
Are you sitting outside?
Yes, I'm sitting by the beach, Cancun, Mexico.
Yeah, your hair is waving, so enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah, one important aspect, it's very, very broad, this bodhicitta in Tibetan Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism in general. Zen doesn't talk about it so much, but compassion and the sense of self-dissolving, these 2 elements at least are very, very basic. Huh? Through the dissolution, the coming to the end of the self-delusion, compassion naturally arises. Huh? Compassion naturally arises. Huh? They're really not even 2 different things, you might say, like 2 sides of the same coin. Huh? Thank you, Julian.
Jeff? I have a question about practice.
It's about time.
Yeah. Okay, so I've sat with just breath and I've sat with a koan. And there does seem to be a kind of more focused, deeper kind of questioning with the koan, with the question. But ultimately, it's almost like you get where you're not conscious of it anymore. And I don't know if it's like you stop questioning, but you're just so involved in the breath that the question kind of falls away and you're just totally immersed in the breath. And I guess my question to you is, do you want to allow that to happen if it does and just go with it? Or do you want to somehow, bring yourself back to focusing on that question when your breath becomes so shallow and you're almost not sleeping, but you're just so kind of low and but yet involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The breath itself will do. Just really giving yourself to the breath without any, cogitation, conceiving at all. The breath itself will do, but it does tend to come to an end at some point. So that's why rousing, in this sense, a koan, consciously taking up something that it's maybe like an anchor that we lock onto. Who, what? And there's a genuine need to get to the bottom of that question. If it's a living, breathing koan, it's coming out of yourself. It's not just something you're putting in there, huh? If it's coming from out of the depths of yourself, even if it's a given koan, but eventually if it's coming from out of yourself, then stick with that. The breath can be used to refine it, but you do want to hold on to it in a sense.
But ultimately, if it falls away and it's just breath at that point, that's okay.
Probably not. Probably not. Is the koan alive and breathing for you?
Yes, but the two of them combine into like this one thing that just becomes total involvement in the breath. Oh,
But it doesn't disappear then. It should become even clearer because they're not two things, right?
that's why my question is
You follow? That breath should be who or what. You follow?
yeah.
It doesn't need to be articulated. In that sense, you're quite right. You don't need to be, I need to remember my koan. Okay. The breath itself, you're breathing the koan.
Koan, yes.
Koan is breathing.
The exhalation. But
It
ultimately,
shouldn't disappear. But as a matter of fact, there are many people for whom a koan doesn't work, a given koan. It doesn't work. They can't make that leap. Do you know what I mean? You have to accept certain things in being given a formal koan and then, cementing yourself to it. It can be done, but it doesn't work for everyone. Some people have an adverse reaction to it. And in the beginning, can't be helped.
like one skin sack, one soul.
Don't separate the breath from the koan. The breath is the koan, breathing. But the question doesn't disappear. It becomes clear. Okay?
Right. Thank you.
I have a question, Jeff. Sometimes, well, at least during this retreat, some periods, that's my perception, some periods asked me for immersing and cementing to the koan. In some periods asked me to do just shikantasa and just sit without doing absolutely anything. So I'm switching. Some periods are more oriented to the koan, and some periods are more oriented to shikantasa.
I would suggest you use this retreat to figure out which one works and then stick with it. You know, it's not good to be going back and forth and back and forth. Find out which one works. Which one can you take to the very end? Which one do you need? Which one can you not really let go of? And then stick with it till the end. If you're going to go bouncing back and forth, you know, right? So take this time, this weekend, and see which one do you need to take up and then go with it. Okay?
You mean between shikantasa and the koan? Okay.
Either one will do, but in a sense, the koan is easier. There's a challenge there. The shikantasa, I wouldn't say just sitting, but just sitting through is very, very demanding. I know very, very few people who have really just sat through in shikantasa and really awakened. But I know many people using a koan who have really been able to have a breakthrough. I mean, shikantasa, just sitting through, is a very, very pure, in a sense, very, very elite practice. So if you have a koan that really grabs you, stick with that. And then maybe later, when you've really seen through that koan, there can be a time to do shikantasa, true shikantasa. Just sitting without anything inside, outside, or in between.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, I'd like to ask Jeff about that, gluing ourselves to that koan, or to that fundamental question that's within us. I find that I don't always do that. Sometimes through an hour sit, I can be locked onto it. Other times it is more amorphous. It comes and goes. Can you talk to how to allow it? Do we relax in that situation, or do we just become more focused? Or do we accept that variation? Can you talk to that?
Are you running away, escaping from the koan? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So in that case, let the koan be as clear as it can be. The what or the who. May I ask, for the benefit of everyone, can you state your koan?
Who is this?
Okay.
Who?
Who is this? So it just comes down to who. Eventually just the breath breathing itself. And it's not always going to be the same intensity. It's quite natural, right? You come in from work and you have some things on your mind. Try to, as much as you can, settle that stuff before you sit. And then when you sit, just let the breath. And then see, can you really get out of that? Can your mind really go to something more amorphous, as you say? Can it?
Well, Jeff, it seems to be, sometimes it's very glued the entire time. It can be for several sits, and sometimes it changes. And it's just trying to understand, to allow myself to relax, to see the rest of the world coming in.
Yeah.
Where am I fooling myself? Should there be a stronger, more intense concentration to go back to it? Am I forcing myself? Am I trying to grasp something, or do I allow myself to let it open up?
Yeah, as long as you're open, David, huh? Remain open. You're not escaping into things. You're not running away from it. Then that's enough. You don't have to, you've read, we both read, excerpts from the Chan Whip anthology, for example, where, monks are just spending days and days and days, banging their heads against the wall with great, concentration, and eventually they have a tremendous breakthrough. But this is a real extreme form of practice in the life that you're living as a lay person. You're committed. You're committed, and you have time, correct? So take that practice. It's precious, you know that, huh? And the time that you have when you're sitting, and just give yourself to it. Do you wander away a bit? Just give yourself to it. Just give yourself. You don't have to worry about, last sit was really glued and this one is not. Who makes that distinction in the first place? Okay, so yeah, it's not always going to be the same way, but you are always there in it, aren't you? What was the word you use? It becomes amorphous. Probably the samadhi is lacking the depth of samadhi, huh?
Well, your words about the practice is constant forever. I mean, it goes on for the rest of our life, and there's an effort that's in that, yet the effort can become a grasping. And so it's
Yes.
trying to balance those two. How do you continue on not knowing, and how do you let go at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. As you continue on, you're able to let go, aren't you? It's very strange, but the further you go, the more you can really let go from the bottom up. So I wouldn't worry too much about the comparisons. Just continue right where you are, Dave. Completely there, engaged, but not forced. You don't have to force it. You don't have to force it now, Dave. Just don't budge from it. You know what I mean? Don't budge. Okay?
So this is not a question. It's about Cyrus. What he said really struck me about energy and vitality and movement. And so that for me, thank you, Cyrus, that really has helped me to be with this. Energy and vitality. Where am I coming from? Thank you.